What is hemodynamics? Let's break it into two words from which it is derived of. Here, hemo comes from heme, which means blood. And the word dynamics means movement. So, simply the term hemodynamics is used to describe the movement of blood. So here in this video, we will discuss some basic principles involved in the movement of blood, or in hemodynamics. To understand them better, we need to develop a complete understanding of the general anatomy of the heart and blood vasculature. We have videos with detailed knowledge of the general anatomy and physiology of the heart, the blood vessels, and in fact, on a complete cardiovascular system. So you can check it out there and develop an in-depth understanding of all these structures before the concept of hemodynamics. Here I am going to briefly revise the general blood flow. That starts from the right side of the heart, where the right atrium receives deoxygenated blood from the rest of the body and pumps it to the right ventricle. That sends blood to pulmonary circulation for oxygenation. Then this oxygenated blood returns back to the left side of the heart, more specifically the left atrium. From there it passes to the left ventricle, and then is pushed to the aorta from the left ventricle, which is the greatest artery of CVS. This aorta then branches off to form arteries. Arteries give rise to further branches with smaller diameters, called arterioles. And then these arterioles finally transmit the coming oxygenated blood to the capillary bed, where gaseous and material exchange takes place at the tissue level. And then again the other end of the capillary joins to give rise to another type of vessel, called venules. Remember, these venules are now carrying deoxygenated blood. Venules then merge to form veins, and ultimately these veins from the upper and lower portion of the body merge to give rise to the superior and inferior vena cava. That was at first responsible for the transportation of deoxygenated blood from the rest of the body to the right side of the heart. So, the cycle completes here. And with this cycle, we have revised all the structures involved in blood flow and the direction of the flow of blood. I hope your previous knowledge has been refreshed now, and the concept is clear. Now let's move ahead. To keep the concept simple, just ignore the other factors and consider that for the left side of the heart to the complete circulation, and then the return of the blood to the right side of the heart is all done through a single straight tube. Right now, we are not talking about any cyclic variations, just assume the flow of blood through a single straight tube. And to make it more simple, we assume a steady blood flow driven by constant pressure throughout the circulation. Then we can compare this flow of blood to Ohm's law of electricity. That is, delta V is equal to I into R. This shows the voltage difference, which is equal to the product of current and resistance. And in terms of blood flow, this equation can be written as delta P is equal to Q into R, which represent the pressure difference, delta P, between an upstream point, for example P1, and a downstream site, for example P2, is equal to the product of the blood flow, F, and the resistance, R, between those 2 points. From this equation we can derive Q is equal to delta P by R. This represents that the total blood flow, or cardiac output, is directly proportional to pressure difference if resistance is kept constant, and is inversely proportional to the resistance through the vasculature if pressure is kept constant. Here, it is called Ohm's law of hydrodynamics. And this Ohm's law of hydrodynamics holds at any instant in time, regardless of how simple or how complicated the circuit is. Now, to better understand this equation, we need to understand two concepts here. Delta P. That is the pressure difference, and R, that is the resistance throughout the vasculature, as they both are influencing the blood flow directly. So, let's talk about resistance first. Resistance is defined as opposition offered to the flow of blood. That means blood does not flow simply like water through the pipe, but there are many factors involved that offer resistance to this blood flow. And these factors can be explained better by Poiseuille's equation. That claims resistance is equal to 8 times the product of viscosity and length of the blood vessel, divided by the product of pi and the 4th power of the radius of the blood vessels. That means resistance is directly proportional to the viscosity of the blood. Viscosity represents the density of the fluid. More the viscosity, the more resistance will be offered. For example, increasing the viscosity of blood by increasing hematocrit will increase resistance and thus decrease blood flow. Also, resistance is directly proportional to the length of the vessels. That shows, the more the length, the more will be resistance offered to the flow of blood. But resistance is inversely proportional to the 4th power of the vessel radius. That means if the radius of the vessel will be larger, the resistance will be lesser, and vice versa. Well, this relationship is powerful. For example, if blood vessel radius decreases by a factor of 2, then resistance increases by a factor of 16, and blood flow accordingly decreases by a factor of 16. So, these all factors directly affect the resistance, and so indirectly affect the hemodynamics. Similarly, in addition to all factors described, resistance also varies with location within the body, or more precisely, it varies with the arrangement of blood vessels. As, if we come to reality, then the flow of blood is not that simple, but the blood has to pass the complicated vasculature to reach its destination. And the blood can take many different pathways from the left side of the heart to the right side of the heart, such as it can pass a single capillary bed, for example, coronary capillaries, or it may pass 2 capillary beds in series, for example, glomerular and peritubular capillaries in the kidney, or it may pass 2 capillary beds in parallel that subsequently merge and feed into a single capillary bed in series. For example, the parallel splenic and mesenteric circulations, which merge on entering the portal hepatic circulation. Whereas in contrast, blood flow from the right side of the heart to the left side of the heart can take only a single pathway across a single capillary bed in the pulmonary circulation. So, the overall resistance, or total, across a circulatory bed results from parallel and serial arrangements of branches and is governed by laws similar to those for the electrical resistance of DC circuits. So, this overall resistance is usually expressed as parallel resistance and series resistance. This parallel resistance is illustrated by systemic circulation, as each organ is supplied by an artery that branches off the aorta, and the total resistance of this parallel arrangement is expressed by this equation, where RA, RB, and RN are the resistances of the renal, hepatic, and other circulations, respectively. Now, this equation actually represents that each artery in parallel receives a fraction of the total blood flow, and so the total resistance is less than the resistance of any of the individual arteries. So, according to this equation, when an artery is added in parallel, the total resistance decreases, and in each parallel artery, the pressure is the same. But series resistance is illustrated by the arrangement of blood vessels within a given organ, and we know that each organ is supplied by a large artery, then smaller arteries, then arterioles, then capillaries, and then veins, arranged in series. So, the total resistance offered to the blood flow to that particular organ is the sum of the individual resistances, as expressed by this equation. The largest proportion of resistance in this series is contributed by the arterioles, and each blood vessel, for example, the largest artery or set of blood vessels, for example, all of the capillaries, in series receives the same total blood flow. Thus, blood flow through the largest artery is the same as the total blood flow through all of the capillaries. So, this was all about resistance. Now, other than resistance, another factor that has a great impact on blood flow is blood pressure. We know that blood pressure is the pressure or force per unit area applied by the blood to the wall of the vessels and heart chambers. Mainly when we say blood pressure, we are talking about arterial blood pressure. Practically, this arterial blood pressure is pulsatile and is not constant during different phases of the cardiac cycle. This pressure reaches its maximum value during the ventricular systole, and thus it is called systolic pressure. And the arterial pressure is lowest during the diastole of the cardiac cycle when the heart is relaxed, and thus it is called diastolic pressure. Here, what happens is that in the aorta, the blood pressure is maximum because it is the immediate structure after the left ventricle. So when the left ventricle pumps blood, then it receives it with maximum pressure. And then the pressure continues to drop as it moves from aorta to arteries, to arterioles, to capillaries, to venules, to veins, and then to the right atrium, where pressure is minimum. As we know, fluid moves from a high pressure area to low pressure area. In this way, this pressure difference acts as a deriving force for the flow of blood throughout the vasculature. But the overall pressure difference is fairly constant over time, and thus generates constant flow. However, the overall flow output, that is, the cardiac output, may vary due to certain physiological and pathological factors. So, overall there are many factors that affect hemodynamics, but the main two that play a major role in altering blood flow are resistance and pressure, which we have explained in this video. For more such interesting videos, keep visiting sqadia.com.
Watch our medical videos anytime and anywhere. Download sqadia.com app now.